Good afternoon and welcome to the next installment in our Upheaval Management webinar series. Today we'll be talking about psychological factors of selling your business, and I am truly blessed and honored to be able to introduce my dear friend, Dr. David Gruder. He's an exceptional talent in the psychological space. He has extraordinary history in just about everything you can imagine with regard to working with people, from being a recovering musician to marketing training to a fair amount of psychological experiences and a deep breadth of knowledge in education and mentorship. So sit back, relax, prepare yourself for a very dense but fulfilling hour of education.
Well, thank you for that, Jason. And I'm going to start my screen share. And there we go. So you're able to see that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very good. Psychological factors in selling your business is what we're going to be focusing on today. And I am going to ask you to, one of you, to monitor the chat box in case there are questions. And I'll be glad to respond to those as we go along.
I will facilitate that.
Awesomeness. So here we go. Here's what we're going to cover today. The shift from being a business owner to being a business seller is the first theme. The second is, in service of that, 3 big psychological savvy keys for selling your business. And the third is some implementation recommendations. And with that, let's open up the curtain to the business owner's dilemma. And what I would suggest is that, other than bankruptcy, selling is the most stressful event that business owners experience, emotionally as well as financially. And so preparing to sell a business is really kind of like preparing for an empty nest if you're a child. How do you prepare your child for adulthood? How do you prepare yourself for no longer being the primary parent or having that be your primary focus in life anymore? How do you shift from being a business owner to a business seller? And what will you do with yourself after your child, after your business flies the coop, after your business is sold? So this is about preparing for the empty nest version of selling a business. And just by way of background briefly, for those of you who don't already know me, I'm a rather peculiar psychologist because my background is in master planning. I was trained in master planning a decade before I got my doctorate in clinical and organizational development psychology. And over the decades, as an entrepreneur and as a trainer and as a leader, and I've been an entrepreneur myself since 1980, I've received 3 leadership and culture awards. I've been recognized by Radio TV Interview Report as America's Integrity Expert, featured in Forbes and Inc. and a number of other outlets over the years. I've been involved in various capacities with 24 books, and my own books have won a total of 8 awards. And a number of those have been in the field of business. So I've got that kind of background as a psychologist. So I'm a little bit of an odd duck in the field of psychology. There are 3 big psychological savvy shifts that are important to make for selling a business as a business owner. One is a mindset shift, one is a skills shift, and the third is a life shift. So I want to unpack those. So shift number 1 is mindset, and it's about, ironically, a dispensability mindset. So what do I mean by that? As a founder or starter of a business, when you started your business, like all of us, You started off being indispensable. The business could not survive without you because you were the one that was birthing it and nurturing it and growing it. And as the business grew, you came to be able to afford to bring in people that supported you. So you were still indispensable, but you were supported. The shift, the mindset shift into being a business seller is to become dispensable, not indispensable. The shift from indispensable to dispensable is pretty rattling to a lot of business owners because they know rightly that in order for the business to get off the ground, they needed to be indispensable in the beginning. And of course, indispensability, when it's not outgrown, becomes micromanaging and overfunctioning and things like that that cause the people around us to underfunction. So we need, as business owners who are shifting toward becoming business sellers, to access the courage to make ourselves dispensable. And that so our job becomes the opposite of proving that your business can't survive without you. It's about proving that your business can survive without you. That's a very important mindset shift to be aware of. And I learned this about becoming dispensable in one of the roles that I've filled over the course of my life. So I've founded for-profits and nonprofits. I've been on for-profit and nonprofit boards. I was the founding president of a nonprofit that was incorporated as a nonprofit, as a 501c3 in 1998. And it's thriving to this day, but it was not something that I had intended to add to my plate. And so my own need was really what fueled a great lesson for me around dispensability. I needed to not be at the helm of this organization forever because there were other things that I wanted to do in my career. And I agreed to serve as the founding president of this is a nonprofit inside my home field of psychology, that is in a specialty area of psychology called energy psychology. And so my objective was to make myself obsolete as quickly as I could. Now, as the founder of a nonprofit, in order to make myself obsolete, I had to make sure that it was financially solvent. I had to make sure that I built an infrastructure that could operate without me and that was functional enough to be used right out of the box, as it were, yet flexible enough to evolve as the organization grew. And it took me 4 years to develop the organization to the point where I had created obsolescence for myself. I had reached a point where I was dispensable. But while I did that initially, I had the goal of obsolescence for my own personal reasons. Building my organization in a way that would ultimately enable me to be dispensable turned out to be a huge, important business lesson for me, because the business that I built, that was a very thriving for-profit business in the 1990s, was one that I had built to be completely dependent on me. I had built it unknowingly in a way that made me permanently indispensable. And so that was a very painful business lesson and a very valuable business lesson. I essentially took that lesson into this nonprofit to make myself dispensable. So that's the mindset shift story. And I have some mindset shift tips and takeaways for you, which is, first one is, forgive yourself for having turned the initial necessity of being the chief cook and bottle washer into a permanent habit. You know, we needed to do that in the beginning. We needed to be the everything in the beginning. We did that for really good reasons. And at some point, we need to forgive ourselves for having turned that into a habit rather than treating that necessity as a stage in the development of a business rather than as a permanent state of affairs. The second tip or takeaway is to face the negative outer impacts of continuing the habit of being indispensable and the negative um, inner impacts, that shouldn't say habits, the negative inner impacts of over identifying with your business. Because as long as we're over identified with our business, as long as we are deriving a huge chunk of our worth and value and identity and how we define ourselves through our business, we will not ever become selling ready. We will not become ready to sell our business. So we need to wake up to the negative impacts of continuing the habit of being indispensable and the negative inner habit of over identifying with our business. Actually, that wasn't a typo after all. Now I realize what I meant by that. And the third mindset shift trap or tip or takeaway is to commit to becoming dispensable. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe there are still things that you need to shift in the business and in your personnel in order for you to become dispensable. But to make the commitment to becoming dispensable, like I say, maybe not tomorrow, but certainly before you begin preparing your business to be sold. So any questions or comments about the mindset shift piece?
So far, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, well, let's give people a moment because maybe they haven't put anything in the chat box about that, but I'll keep going. And if anything shows up, Jason, just feel free to speak up and I'll
Well,
double back.
as we're giving them a little bit of time,
Yeah,
one of the things that I struggled with as an entrepreneur was looking around and trying to build a team that filled my skills gaps. And in doing so, I left a big vacancy where my skills were. And so even if I'm capable of mentally preparing to let go, at what point can I afford to, and how do I shift into filling my specific skills gap in a young company?
yeah, great question. Great question. And great learning there. So one of the things that I do with business owners is I take them through a gaps analysis where we look at all of the types of expertise and help and assistance that the business is going to need at some point. And then we look at the question of which of those areas of expertise does the business owner actually have for themselves, and which don't they have. We look at whether there are some areas of expertise they don't yet have, but they need to develop in order to become the leader their business needs them to be to succeed. We look at some of their areas of existing expertise around the question of just because I can doesn't necessarily mean I should. Just because they can do certain things, is it best for the business and for their business ultimate goals for them to continue to do some of those things that they can do, or are those things that are better for the business for them to have others do? And then other areas of expertise and implementation that shouldn't be theirs to do, or they can do but should be others to do, but things that aren't in their wheelhouse that the business still needs. So all of those things need to be looked at very closely in a gaps analysis. Your own gaps as a leader that you do need to fill, and gaps that other people need to fill, or things that you have that you can do that others would be wiser for the sake of the business to fill. So brilliantly said and brilliant point, Jason.
Hey, thanks. It didn't buy enough time for new questions, so we'll let you move on.
Okay,
Thank you,
let's
though.
do. Sure, thank you. Shift number 2 is skills. So this is about exit readiness leadership, which is a different style of leadership than startup leadership skills. So the skill shift primarily at its core is we start off when we start a business, when we're operating as the founding startup CEO, we are the hero. But in order to shift into a leadership style that is a selling readiness leadership style, we have to shift from being the hero to being the guide. The business is the guide to its customers. The kind of hero I'm talking about here is about being the hero inside the company. That the company, again, it's about dispensability or indispensability. The company can't survive without me. The leadership shift skill set that's necessary, skills shift that's necessary is to shift into being the guide who nurtures the next generation of leaders in the business. So you become the leader your business needs you to be so you can sell it in ways that honor your people and preserve your brand, your values, and your culture, and that meet your selling objectives, your objectives in selling the business. So to go a little bit further, there's selling price, there's personnel, and there's culture. The skill shift objectives are to build your business so it can be sold for a price or generates revenues that significantly propel you toward living your ultimate life goals. If you don't know what your ultimate life goals are, if you don't know what your ideal calendar is, how you would ideally like to allocate your time, your ideal lifestyle, and your ideal legacy, you don't know how big to build your business. You don't know how big it needs to be, how much revenue it needs to generate, or how much its value, selling price needs to be in order for you to live your ultimate life goals. So you need to be very clear about what your ultimate life goals are. Again, your ideal calendar, lifestyle, and legacy, and to build it so that it can be sold for that price, or so that if your exit goal is not selling the business, but it is having the business operate without you being the chief cook and bottle washer, so that you're more the chairperson of the board and the chief visionary and things like that. You need to know what revenues it needs to generate and what it can be sold for. And in order to do that, you need to build your people and your culture so that if you're working toward getting a buyer, so your buyer wouldn't be a fool to change things significantly. And the reason that's important is because if you don't build your people and your culture so a buyer would be a fool to change things significantly, then your personnel are going to get in the way of the sale. They're going to be terrified that if you succeed at selling the business, they'll be out of a job. Or they might still have a job, but the culture will be changed so significantly that they'll go from being delighted to be a high performer in your business to being an unhappy employee. So the objectives in skills shift is having a realistic view of what your company's value is, because for most sellers, for most business owners, the trap is to think your company is worth more than it actually is in a buyer's eyes. So you need to get realistic. You need to be willing to get realistic so that if you still want to sell your company for the amount you want to sell it for, and it can't be sold for that now, that you can then become the kind of leader your business needs you to be in order to grow it to the point where it can be sold for the amount that you want to sell it for. And you also need to have an avatar, a picture of what your ideal buyer is. I don't mean what company buys your business. I mean what their qualities are. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a couple of moments, but you're closing the gap between your company's true value, what its actual valuation is, and what you want to sell it for. And you define your buyer values and intentions. So the values and intentions that you want your buyer to have, and what the deal breakers are, what values or intentions a buyer might have that would be a non-starter for you with a potential buyer. This is really not that different from finding a prospective marriage partner. a prospective primary relationship. You need to know what values you require in a partner, what intentions, what objectives, what goals, and what are deal breakers in the relationship. And it's worthwhile to consider whether you want to sell the company to a buyer outside the company, or whether you want to sell the company to your employees, whether your best selling option, if selling is what you want to do, to consider an ESOP or another employee ownership plan. And so a quick story about skills shift from heroes to guides. So I was engaged a while back now in by a family-owned company, a company owned by two brothers who had decided that they wanted to, it was time for them to retire, and that they wanted to, instead of selling their company, they wanted to turn their company over to their kids. So both of these two owners had children, and so there were going to be there were four kids involved, and two kids from each family. And they needed, the owner brothers needed to set standards for the turnover and up-level the infrastructure in the company, and they needed to groom those kids into becoming the next leaders. In other words, they needed to shift, the brothers needed to shift from being the heroes in the company to being the guides of the next generation of leaders, which were their kids. And so I was brought in to facilitate that shift, so that the brothers became guides, and the next the guides of the next generation of leaders, which in this example, in a family-owned company, happened to be the children. So skills shift tips and takeaways. First thing is to articulate and optimize your policies and procedures. Make sure that your policies and procedures work without you there all the time, that the policies and procedures are robust and engaging, and that they enhance engagement, or what's called discretionary effort, where your people are working beyond the minimum that they would need to work in order to collect a paycheck. That's what discretionary effort means. Your policies and procedures need to facilitate enhanced discretionary effort and enhanced productivity and enhanced collaboration on the part of your team, and enhanced customer satisfaction, customer delight, so that, again, you're building a culture through your policies and procedures where your personnel are going to be seen as being indispensable, and your culture is going to be seen as being indispensable to the buyer of your company. You want to automate it as much of your processes as you can, so you can pay your people more to do the things that automation can never do, so that they really stick around. And again, you want to groom your next generation of executives, managers, and team leaders as part, again, of you becoming dispensable and making them indispensable to the buyer. You also want to communicate your enthusiasm about making your company culture so compelling and your personnel so indispensable that a new owner would be a fool to get rid of them or the culture, as I mentioned earlier. And you would be very wise, and this is a timing issue. You want to make sure you wait to say what I'm about to describe until you're ready to pull the trigger on the selling process, so that you don't, panic your people prematurely. But at the right time, you want to tell your people about the values and intentions that you will be requiring a buyer to have, because that's going to put them at ease. And for you to be willing to sell to that buyer, and also about your values and intentions deal breakers. So if you haven't gotten clear about what those are beforehand, you're not going to be in a position to articulate those to your people. And at the right time, telling your people about these things, that it's going to decrease their anxiety, because they're going to have more confidence that when the business gets sold, it's going to be sold to somebody who's not going to rape and pillage them. And again, finally, to come back to something I mentioned earlier, consider selling your company to your own people and consider other exit options. Perhaps selling the company may not be the thing to do for quite a while. Maybe it's about you making yourself so dispensable that you can go to spend a month on the beach in Tahiti, just as an example, and to know that your company's revenues are going to be great and you're going to continue to get paid really well because after all, it's your company, but you don't have to be involved on a day-to-day basis. You might do a 4-hour work week as your exit plan. So, selling a business is not the only exit goal that's possible. There's a whole menu of exit goals that are available. The IPO, of course, is another exit goal. But really, it's important to work with business advisors, with business resources like Blue Sky, who can help you evaluate the pros and cons of different exit options so that you match your exit option with your goals. So, any questions about skill shift? Or any comments that you have about skill shift, Jason?
I've got a question. One of the things that I know you feel very strongly about and have some great insights on is shaping your destiny. And I think we both agree that shaping your destiny is different than controlling your destiny. But talk to me about how everything you just taught us about fits into that concept of shaping your destiny and how timing plays a role in all of that.
Okay, so 2 parts to that, shaping your destiny and then timing. First of all, shaping your destiny. We build businesses, hopefully, for 2 primary reasons and with one ultimate touchstone in mind as well. So the 2 reasons and then the touchstone. The first reason is because hopefully our business enables us to express significant slices of our impact mission in life, the positive impact we want to have in the world. And if we're not purpose driven in those ways, we're not going to have a lot of passion about the business. We're not going to really stick with it through thick and thin. And we're not going to have the passion that empowers us to keep our team passionate. So we need to be very clear about what our impact mission is in life and the slices of that we get to express through our business, because hopefully our impact mission is so big that our business isn't the only part of our life that we need to have in our life in order to express our full impact mission. And then the second piece I mentioned earlier, which is what are our ultimate life goals? What is the ideal calendar, lifestyle, and legacy we're wanting to work toward? And how are we utilizing this business to propel us toward ultimately living our ultimate life goals? The mediator on that is, and by the way, before I get to the mediator, that tells us how big to build the business before we exit. And then the mediator on that is, what are our life balance commitments between now and when we are living our ultimate life goals? What are we going to do to preserve our own health and well-being, our cherished relationships, our values, our ability to express other parts of ourselves that are important to us that we don't get to express through our business? These are all of the things that are about purpose-driven business. And then the question of timing. Timing is determined ideally by the business having grown to the point where its revenues enable us to live our ultimate life goals, or where its valuation is high enough for it to be sold at a price that can enable us to live our ultimate life goals, our ideal calendar, lifestyle, and legacy once again. So the timing has to be strategic in that way. And between now and when the business is big enough to do that, we need to again focus our attention on shifting our leadership style from being the hero to being the guide, from being indispensable to being dispensable, so that we can reach that finish line. Am I responding to the question you were asking, Jason, or did I miss your point?
No, you've actually hit a lot more than I anticipated. So, classic Dr. Gruder. The one thing that I would say is, this sounds like a big undertaking. It sounds like a lot of work. And one of the questions that comes up is, when do I have to start this in order to be able to hit those timing criteria that you had mentioned in the exit portion?
Yes. So interestingly, the seeds for this start when you start your business. Now, you don't start your business in order to sell it, but you do, ideally, you start your business with clarity about your why, your impact why. Why are you doing this business? Of all the businesses you can be building, why this one in terms of your impact mission? You start with clarity about your ultimate life goals so that you know how big your business needs to become in terms of its revenues and or its valuation in order for you to live those ultimate life goals. And you start with life balance commitments, which tells you how fast to scale the business. If you don't know what your life balance commitments are, then you will probably scale it faster than your sanity will allow. And so when you start the business, ideally, you're starting it with exit in mind in those ways. Now, when do you start actively propelling the business toward an exit? You do that when your business is generating sufficient revenue so that you can afford to pull back from being indispensable to being dispensable. When you can afford to turn your attention over to grooming the next generation of leaders. You can afford to devote time to building your ideal buyer avatar so that you know what kind of buyer you're actually looking for and what the deal breakers are. That's when you actually do the active shift from becoming a startup CEO to becoming a business seller CEO. Is that responsive to what you were asking?
That is good, and it gives me one more follow-up, and then I think we'll move on. But the
Sure.
one more follow-up is, this all sounds like a very personal and lonesome, the typical entrepreneur's journey. When during this progression should an entrepreneur start looking at, just like going from being the hero to the guide, when do they start shifting from being the lone leader, the entrepreneur, charting this course on his own or her own, to forming a succession team that is facilitating this individualized growth that the leader can then translate through the rest of their business?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to go beyond your question. So succession team first. You're you're wanting to have an eye on successors inside the company from day one. It's never too soon to be looking at the question of who can you groom. You're always wanting to look at who you can groom to be a team leader, who you can groom to be a manager, who you can groom to be an executive, who you can groom to be the next CEO, so that you can move into being the chairperson of the board. And so it's never too soon to do that. When you want to really start paying attention to that in a big way is when you've built the business to the point where you know, if you're using investor money, you no longer have a burn rate, where you got zero burn, where your business is generating more revenue than it needs in order to pay its bills. When you have money that's that's above and beyond your bills coming in the way of revenue, so that you can fund expansion that you're going to need to do in order to be able to sell your business at the price you want to sell it. So it's at that point that you really want to make this shift in a big kind of way. But who do you want to have at your side, and when do you want to have someone at your side? Look, entrepreneurship is like building an airplane that's never been built before, learning how to fly it, and then building an airline around that airplane to serve its customers. Nobody gets into an airplane to learn how to fly it without a flight instructor. So, and the flight instructor's job is not to run the business for you. It's not to fly the airplane for you. It's to sit beside you in the cockpit and make sure you don't inadvertently fly into a mountain. You need advisors from day one. From day one. Because it is lonely at the top. That's by definition. Leaders are lonely, and they have things, we as leaders always have things on our mind that we know are not appropriate to talk about with the personnel in our company. That we need to talk to some of these things with someone outside our company who's an objective observer and a mentor, and is going to provide an outside the company perspective about inside the company issues. It's never too soon to have those kinds of advisors. And frankly, that's a big part of what Blue Sky does, long before facilitating a transaction, a sales transaction. Is that responsive to what you were asking?
That goes above and beyond. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Oh, you're welcome. So shift number 3, the third of these 3 shifts, is about life. As a business founder and owner, it's next chapter master planning. It's master planning the next chapter of your life beyond the business sale. So life shifting is, it's almost impossible to be a founding business owner or a founding CEO and not wrap up some of your sense of identity into your business. So the life shift is shifting out of over identifying who you are and what your value is through your business, through into reconnecting with and reassessing and up-leveling your impact mission in the world, so that you get to see other ways that you can live your impact mission in the world beyond your business. And your ULGs is the abbreviation for Ultimate Life Goals. Again, ideal, calendar, lifestyle, and legacy. So you update your impact mission, your purpose, your sense of life meaning, and you define your desired calendar, lifestyle, and legacy. And you also need to set up a sound wealth preservation plan so that the money you sell the business for doesn't evaporate and get misused in ways that interfere with or sabotage your ability to live your desired, your ideal calendar, lifestyle, and legacy. So this is an important shift in identity and in focus. Life shift story is died too soon. So I was a mentor and a trusted advisor to a visionary owner of a large entrepreneur development company. And I helped him through all of these 3 keys, through moving from being indispensable into being dispensable, and through up-leveling procedures so that he could become indispensable and he became the guide rather than the hero, and through crafting a next life chapter so that he had something huge to look forward to beyond being the founding CEO and chairman of this company. And he had made the shift and was very excited about the work in his impact mission that he was starting to do beyond this company that he founded. And unfortunately, he waited too long to make that shift. And he ended up dying before he could really fully live his ideal calendar lifestyle and legacy, and before he could fulfill his impact mission in his post business life. So the moral of the story is, don't wait. Don't wait. It's never too soon to start crafting your vision for that next step and to start restructuring your business to help you live that vision sooner rather than later. So life
Yeah, and
shift, yes?
if I could just jump in really quickly,
Yeah.
the other piece to that story, and the piece that we deal with all too often that is heartbreaking, is not only did that visionary owner not get the opportunity to live their life story, but the family was left picking up the pieces and trying to balance their grieving process with the management of a business that wasn't their vision. And so, that part too is, it's the most heartbreaking, and it's also a difficult conversation to have for most entrepreneurs. But how do you want your life story to play out and be lived out by you? Also, how do you want your family life story to be impacted by your legacy? And so, that's another piece that I just want to make sure that we're all thinking of before we can't anymore.
I'm really glad you added that, Jason. You're spot on. Spot on. And you and I and all of us at Blue Sky have seen our share of misery and suffering that the business owner who died would never have wished to inflict on their family. And yet, here they are. Here is the family saddled with something that they aren't prepared to know how to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So, Stephen, in terms of tips and takeaways, Stephen Covey's famous line from the seven Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind, is almost correct. It's really begin with the best possible end in mind. That's how businesses need to begin, with the best possible end in mind. And that's why advisors are so helpful, because oftentimes business owners undersize what they think their business is capable of becoming. And it's very valuable to be taken through a supersizing process, preferably by a couple of experts, so that you get a vision of different supersizing scripts, so that you can then make decisions about whether to pursue a supersized version of your company, or whether that's what right-sized is, or whether the right-sized version of your company is somewhere between what you thought it might be able to be and what it's fully capable of being. And right-sizing is however big it needs to be, so that you can fund yourself to live your ideal calendar lifestyle and legacy. So begin with the best possible end in mind. Start now. Wherever you are in your business, start today to craft a clear vision of what you want your life to look like after you exit your business, no matter what that exit plan looks like, even if it's exiting meaning that you're no longer the chief cook and bottle washer, but what you want your life to look like after you exit your business. Identify your impact mission and your ultimate life goals, and revisit and upgrade these things as needed when you start getting ready to sell your business, so you're already looking forward to it when you begin the process of selling your business. Because if you're not already clear about what your post-business chapter is going to be in your life, you're going to unconsciously undermine the process of selling your business, because psychologically you're not yet on board with being excited about a next life chapter after the business that you've already crafted and master planned. So, any questions about life shifts?
So we have one great question here, and it goes to kind of the underlying thread. It seems from this question that, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it seems like they're looking at, there's the internal psychological factor that runs through this whole thing, in the preparation and the planning, but the execution piece is always communication. And so how do we translate from that internal psychological planning thread into a successful communication throughout the organization? And how do we know where those lines are drawn sometimes in being transparent versus being open and appropriately communicative?
Beautiful question. So this is a question that is in that category we were talking about earlier about it being lonely at the top, being lonely as a leader. These are questions that ethical um, leaders really struggle with. And this is where our trusted advisors come in. These are decisions, the kinds of questions that this person is asking, coming to decisions about the answers to those questions should never be made in a vacuum. They need to be made with the right kinds of advisors at your side so that you can weigh questions and timing issues that you didn't even know you didn't know needed to be taken into consideration. And then to make sure that you have someone on board who's a culture architect who can help you not just time the delivery of that information, that news about that you're moving into a selling phase to your personnel, but how to craft and deliver that message and how to deal in good ways with the fear reactions that your people will have no matter how well you deliver the messaging at the right time to deliver the messaging. People will still get scared. There still will be blowback. There still will be a sense of uh, well, in psychology, it's called slow to warm up, a slow to warm up reaction, where the first impulsive reaction is, no, we can't do that. And to have the grace with your people to let them go through their slow to warm up reactions and to nurture and support them through that process rather than reacting defensively or shutting them down with those reactions, to really walk with them as the guide, not the hero, to help them grow into the opportunity that exists for them in the next chapter of the business's development after they're over the hump of their initial fear over the news. Is that responding to what you think the question was, or
Yeah, I
is there
think
more?
that's great. You know, the two pieces of personal thoughts that I'd like to throw in, and
Yeah,
you can speak to them too, is, it all starts with your own confidence and comfort as a leader. When I was starting my own businesses, it was always my mantra from day one. Look, guys, I'm not going to be here forever. When we're making these decisions, let's make sure that our process is durable. So if I walk out and get hit by a bus, you guys can carry on. We all believe in this. I took the first step, but the next steps are yours. And having that lack of fear about the change, it makes it very easy for your team to also not fear it.
beautifully said. And that's in training language, that's called setting standards, where what you brilliantly did, Jason, was that you didn't even speak to the issue of, well, this business is going to be sold. It might be sold, it might not be sold. But you talked about succession planning from the very beginning, that we don't know what life has in store. I could get hit by a bus today. And I am so committed to this business and to all of you as the personnel in the business that I want to make sure that we're always thinking about how can we elevate our engagement, our productivity, our collaboration, our policies, our procedures, our automations, everything, so that if heaven forbid I do die prematurely, the business will go on, you will go on, our mission will go on.
Yeah, the only tricky point, and I'll give you guys this as a personal experience warning too, is be prepared for sometimes in some situations having an employee say, I wish you would get hit by that bus.
Yes,
Because those moments happen too.
they do. And that's important. Just real quickly, if I can just very briefly respond to that. Uh, those people who say that are in one of two categories generally. They are either people who are disgruntled and you knew you needed to release them a long time ago and you talked yourself out of it, or they're canaries in a coal mine and they're incredibly valuable in terms of the information they have for you about what you don't know is not going well inside the business. And if the people who are saying that fall into that second category, by listening to them and learning from them and responding to them, you could turn them into being your company's absolute biggest loyal advocate.
Absolutely. And fortunately, I've been able to see that happen as well. We do have one more question here, and it goes back to the skills shift.
Yes.
And the question is, before you're ready to start going from indispensable to dispensable, how do you lead through the skills that you're not an expert in?
Ah, well, that goes back to the gaps analysis I was talking about. First of all, whatever those skills are need to be identified. And once those missing skills are identified, a decision needs to be made about whether which of those skills are really yours to elevate in yourself, to upgrade in yourself, in order for you to be the leader your business needs for you to be, for it to succeed, and which of those skills are actually going to be better met by someone else, either that's already in the business or someone else that you bring into the business to fill those particular skills gaps. So there is no cookie cutter answer, but there is a strategy for discovering your customized answer.
Fantastic.
Good.
That's all I've got for questions so far. If anybody else has anything, please don't hesitate to throw it in the chat, and we'll keep this going.
Okay, good. So that moves me into the final section, which is about implementation. And this is about my call to action to you, your call to action. We've already touched on this. Leadership is, by definition, lonely. So who will stay by your side as you step into a dispensability mindset, as you build and implement your exit readiness leadership skills, as you create and enact your next life chapter master plan, as you ensure an honorable transition between the new owner and your existing team? Who's going to stay by your side? So action steps. Blue Sky offers a free key opportunity assessment that that you can complete, and you'll get a report on that assessment, and we'll go over your results with you that can help you identify your action steps, where your gold is, where your strengths are, where your gaps are. Key opportunity assessment. And if you go ahead and take advantage of that free opportunity, we'll throw in a PDF of the slide deck of this presentation as well. Uh, you may be at a point where you need a real accurate external valuation of your business's worth. So Blue Sky offers a business market value assessment, and certified valuations are also available if where you are in the process of preparing to sell is going to necessitate a certified valuation. And the third action step is engage a psychological factors advisor and trainer. Engage someone who can walk beside you with all of these psychological factors around leadership, culture, architecture, and next life chapter planning that you're going to be going through as you move your business forward. And so, you know, we've got this for you at Blue Sky, and so those are my real final comments. So I'm available to provide assistance with psychological factors in growing, selling, and buying businesses through Blue Sky. Anything you want to add? Actually, what I think I'll do maybe is unshare, close the screen share. And there we are. So any other thoughts you want to add, Jason?
The only thing that I would say is, with that second step of action steps, the business and market value analysis, that's a lot of people say, oh, I don't need a business value because I'm not ready to sell, and so this information is really kind of pointless. But it provides meaningful strategic planning information. So, knowing where you're at today in any progress-based effort is critical to helping you define how you're getting where you're headed. And so, even though you may not need a value of your business today, benchmarking is good. Understanding what your peers in the industry are doing is meaningful and valuable. Having a starting point for your next strategic efforts that you can track progress is valuable. So, however you do it, whether you reach out to any of us and talk about doing it with Blue Sky, or whether you find somebody else or do it internally with your team or your CPA, benchmarking and tracking progress is going to help you as you're on this effort of defining the next stages.
Yes, I am, beautifully said. I'm putting into the chat Blue Sky's URL, my email address, and my phone number through Blue Sky, 877-373-6854, extension 714. Did I do that right? Yes. Okay. So there are some ways to be in touch with Blue Sky in general for your free assessment or your BMVA, and ways to be in touch with me specifically through Blue Sky. Anything else we should cover, Jason, before we wrap this up?
I think we can wrap it up. Dr. Gruder, it's always a privilege and a pleasure to learn from you. I hope that everybody that was in attendance enjoyed it as much as I did, and we'll look forward to seeing you all in a couple weeks.
Indeed, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for all of what you added to this presentation, Jason, as you always do.
All right. Thanks, folks. Have a great day.